Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at Argentina, and specifically its genetics. It turns out the DNA story there is, well, way more complex than most people think. Researchers are finding secrets of indigenous survival, big waves of European migration, and even hidden African roots all mixed together.
It's a really fascinating mix.
So our mission today is to unpack why the Argentina gene, as some call it, is seen as so special. Because this isn't just dry science, is it? It gets tangled up with politics, culture.
Oh, absolutely. And identity, big time. There's definitely some controversy there, too.
Okay, so let's start with the standard historical picture. We usually hear about Argentina being shaped by migration waves. You've got the indigenous peoples there for millennia.
Right, the original inhabitants.
Then Spanish colonists arrive. And then late 19th, early 20th century, boom, millions of Europeans, mostly Spanish and Italian. That's the story we know.
That's the textbook version, yeah.
But then the geneticists step in with their data, and suddenly those neat lines get blurry. What did they actually find when they started digging into the ancestral makeup?
Yeah, it really challenges that straightforward narrative.
Yeah.
The genetic studies, they confirm a large part of it, sure. Over 60% of Argentinians show European ancestry, mostly Spanish and Italian, just like the history books say.
Okay, so that part checks out.
But here's where it gets interesting. Around 31, maybe 32% carry indigenous ancestry. That reflects the deep history of peoples like the Mapuche, Quechua, Guarani.
32%, that seems significant. Much higher than you'd maybe assume from the nation of immigrants story.
Exactly. It's a much larger footprint than was often acknowledged historically. And then comes the real surprise for many. About 4 to 9% show African genetic contribution.
4 to 9% African, despite that historical idea that Argentina had, quote, no black population.
Precisely. So the Argentina gene becomes this, living contradiction. What the national story has been doesn't quite line up with the biological reality in the DNA.
Wow. Okay, let's focus on that indigenous ancestry piece for a moment. You said 31, 32%. That's huge, especially when, like you said, textbooks often really downplay that presence.
Right, they push the nation of immigrants angle hard.
So if the DNA is showing this strong indigenous continuity, how does that change things? How does Argentina see itself now?
Well, it forces a pretty major reevaluation, or at least it should. Scientists found that many modern Argentinians, they still carry these very distinct indigenous genetic markers.
Like specific DNA sequences.
Exactly, specific sequences you can trace back, showing direct lineage over thousands of years. And it's not just a tiny trace. In some provinces, think Juju or Salta up north, over 80% of the people have predominantly indigenous ancestry.
80%. Even if culturally they might identify differently.
Yes, even if culturally they might see themselves as mestizo or even primarily European. So this genetic evidence, it fundamentally shifts the perspective. It shows the indigenous past isn't, gone or assimilated away. It's right there, alive in the population's DNA.
That must stir things up. This shift from the historical story to the genetic reality. Does it create friction?
It definitely does. I mean, it leads right into the more contentious side of things. If DNA says one thing, but your cultural identity, your family history says another.
Yeah.
How do you square that?
Yeah, how does a nation deal with that? Is it seen as a source of division or maybe a richer identity?
It's really both, honestly. It depends who you ask.
Yeah.
Some Argentinians really embrace this genetic diversity. They see it as proof of a richer, more complex heritage, something to be proud of.
A more complete picture.
Right. But others resist. They argue, quite strongly sometimes, that identity is about culture, language, lived experience, not just biology. Who you feel you are, how your community identifies, that's what matters most, not a DNA test result. And this tension gets particularly sharp around the African ancestry data. Remember, Argentina spent a long time cultivating this image of being a white European nation in South America, quite distinct from its neighbors.
Right, that was a very deliberate narrative.
Very. So when genetic studies reveal this significant, even if smaller, African contribution, it sparks some really heated debates. Researchers push back, saying, look, ignoring this erases the history and contributions of Afro-Argentinians who were absolutely part of shaping the country.
So it forces a confrontation with perhaps uncomfortable part of the past.
Exactly. And then you also get ethical debates tangled up in all this. Who owns genetic data? Should it be used to define or prove ancestry? Does focusing on genetics risk reinforcing old racial divides instead of bridging them?
Complex questions.
Very. So, yeah, the Argentina gene isn't just science. It's deeply political. It's about race, national pride, historical memory. all of it.
It really touches on everything. Okay, so we've talked identity, history, controversy, but what about the practical side? Does understanding this unique genetic mix have implications for, say, health?
Oh, absolutely. That's another crucial layer.
Yeah.
The genetic diversity in Argentina reveals some really important health patterns.
Such as?
Well, for example, researchers have found certain gene variants that are more common in populations with indigenous ancestry seem to be linked with a higher risk for conditions like type 2 diabetes or hypertension, particularly when people with those variants adopt modern, westernized diets that are quite different from traditional ones their ancestors might have consumed.
So a kind of gene-environment interaction.
Precisely. But it's not all about risk. On the flip side, other genetic traits, perhaps also linked to indigenous or even African ancestry, might confer resilience against certain infectious diseases.
Ah, so there could be protective factors hidden in there too.
Exactly. And understanding those could offer really valuable clues for medical research, not just in Argentina, but potentially globally. So this genetic diversity isn't just a historical curiosity. It has real-world health significance.
That's fascinating. Argentina's genetic story isn't just looking back. It could be key for future health research. But you mentioned global significance. Why is Argentina specifically so important in that context? Yet it seems like Latin America overall is kind of missing from a lot of big genetic studies.
It's a really critical point and a source of frustration for many scientists.
Yeah.
Argentina's pretty unique globally because it has this massive population of European descendants, one of the largest outside Europe itself.
Right, from those big migration waves.
Exactly. But combined with really deep indigenous roots going back millennia and that discernible African thread, it's a remarkable confluence.
A unique blend.
A truly unique blend. Yet despite this, Latin America as a whole represents maybe less than 2% of the data in global genetic research databases. It's a huge blind spot.
Less than 2%. Wow.
Yeah. It means Argentina's DNA and that of other Latin American populations could hold vital answers about human migration, adaptation, disease susceptibility, how different populations respond to medicines. But it's largely untapped potential right now.
So the full story, the full potential of the Argentina gene, we're really just starting to understand it.
We are. There's so much more to learn, so much research still needed. The gap is significant.
Okay, so let's try to pull this together for everyone listening. Why is the Argentina gene considered so special? What's the core takeaway here?
Well, I think
It seems like it's this living mirror reflecting waves of migration, European, yes, but also those incredibly resilient indigenous roots and this often overlooked African heritage. They all converged.
that's a great way to put it. A mirror of convergence, survival, and sometimes, contradiction, all within one nation's DNA.
And scientists see it as this potential treasure chest, right? For understanding history, but also for health discoveries.
Definitely. A genetic treasure, for sure. But as we've discussed, how you handle that treasure, how you tell its story, that matters immensely.
There's that critical aspect, too.
Because genetics can be used to highlight shared humanity, deep connections. Or it can be twisted to emphasize difference, to divide people. It really depends on the narrative built around the science.
A powerful tool that needs careful handling.
Absolutely. Which leads to the big question, really, for you listening. What do you think? Should a nation like Argentina embrace this complex genetic reality wholeheartedly, make it part of its national pride? Or is identity better left to culture, history, personal choice, separate from the biological blueprint?
A really interesting question to ponder. Where does DNA fit in the story we tell about ourselves?